Welcome to the channel. We have a story about an alien. Listen to the story and see where he came from. There are places on Earth that seem frozen in time. Life there moves slowly, calmly, almost lazily. It feels as if they are hidden from the rest of the world in a cocoon of silence. Such was the small Brazilian town of Varjinja in the mid-1990s. Varjinja lay among the green hills and endless coffee plantations of the state of Minas Gerais. By day, the scorching sun dominated the sky, and in the evenings, the rich aroma of freshly harvested coffee beans would rise above the rooftops, mingling with the smoke from cooking fires. People lived simply, worked honestly, drank sweet, strong coffee, laughed, and prepared for traditional celebrations. Nothing unusual ever happened in this town. No loud crimes, no mysterious incidents, just the measured pace of rural life. Varjinja was like a sleepy corner of Brazil, tucked away between the bustling metropolis of São Paulo and the vibrant Rio de Janeiro. But in silence, emptiness always hides. And in that emptiness, like a dark fissure in stone, something alien sometimes breaks through. Something not of this world. The residents had no idea that January 1996 would become the month their quiet town would appear on the maps of ufologists, listed among the strangest and darkest mysteries of the 20th century. For some, it would become a nightmare that would never lift. January began joyfully. The new year had been celebrated with noise and cheer, and ahead lay Carnival, the country's main festival. Girls tried on sparkling costumes, men discussed upcoming football matches, and housewives sold sweets at the markets with cheerful calls. Everything was familiar. And for that reason, the approaching darkness felt all the more unexpected. No one suspected that in the dead of night, strange sounds would echo across the town, waking dogs and frightening cows. No one imagined that just a few days later, military trucks would roll through the streets, and children would cry, insisting they had seen the devil. They say evil never arrives suddenly. It always whispers first, sending faint signals, to those who are able to hear. That night, the first signal was picked up by Eurico Rodriguez, a simple farmhand on the outskirts of town. He did not wake to a loud noise, but to a strange feeling of unease, as if the very air trembled around him. At first, he thought it was simply nocturnal predators scaring the livestock. But when he looked out the window, he saw something. Gray, long, silent. An object resembling a submarine hovered in the night sky. No lights, no sound. Shadows fell across the terrified animals, which mooed and bleated as if sensing impending doom. This episode would have remained a secret for just the two of them. Eurico and his wife dared not tell anyone. They feared ridicule. In a small town, the word UFO sounded both laughable and dangerous. It could easily make them seem crazy. But they did not know that within days, hundreds of people would speak of strange creatures. While some laughed at the rumors, others could feel something heavy thickening in the air. Varjinja seemed to hold its breath. Dogs barked at night more than usual. Children cried in their sleep. And the elders whispered on benches that, the outsiders have come. But for now, these were only hints. Shadows in the darkness. A slight shiver in the chest. Everything changed on January 20th. That day, the town saw the face of its terror for the first time. The night of January 19th to 20th, 1996, began quietly. The heavy summer heat, so typical for this region of Brazil, gradually seeped into the earth as the sun set. Trees on the hills cast long shadows, crickets sang piercing and monotonous tunes, and farmers, weary from a hard day, settled into bed as usual. Yuriko Rodriguez, a modest farm worker on the outskirts of town, couldn't fall asleep. The night felt too quiet, almost unnaturally so. On evenings like this, silence didn't soothe, instead, it pressed against the ears, heavy and foreboding, as if hiding something alien. Closer to midnight, their cows and sheep began to behave restlessly. At first, it was subtle, the soft shuffle of hooves, muffled lowing. But the unease escalated, the animals began to thrash in their pen, mooing and bleating as though something chased them. Probably a jaguar, Yuriko muttered, getting out of bed. But his wife, Orolina Augusta, shook her head. She too had awakened, and her gaze was full of unease. "Listen carefully," she said. "This doesn't sound like an animal." And she was right, the animals weren't merely scared, they seemed to go mad. Desperation rang in their cries, as if they sensed something beyond the reach of human hearing. Yuriko grabbed a flashlight, but when he opened the shutters, he froze. In the sky, low and directly above the field, hovered something enormous. It resembled a dark gray cylinder with rounded edges, like a submarine that had risen from the sea into the night sky. No lights, no sound. Only a pressing shadow that made the earth feel colder beneath it. Was it a creature? A machine? Or had the night itself taken shape? The object remained motionless for several seconds before slowly gliding sideways, as if watching them. And that silent glide was far more terrifying than the roar of any engine. "Oh, my God," whispered Orolina, clutching her chest. The animals thrashed in the pen, some tried to leap over the wooden fences. In their eyes reflected a primal fear, an instinctive terror of something that did not belong to the earth. After 5 minutes, the object seemed to dissolve. It didn't shoot upward or vanish over the horizon, it simply faded into the darkness, as if it had never existed at all. Yuriko and Orolina stood by the window long after. They didn't speak a word to each other, simply gazed at the empty night sky where something alien had hung moments before. They knew that if they told anyone in town, they would be considered mad. People would laugh, shake their heads. And so, the couple decided to remain silent. But silence did not save them. That night was only the beginning. By morning, the animals had calmed down, but a few cows remained lying on the ground, trembling all over. For several days, they refused to eat. The livestock seemed to carry the horror of the encounter with something unseen. And the people didn't yet know that they too would soon see it, not in the sky, but right on the streets of their town. And then, no one would be able to shake off the fear. Strange events were happening in Virginia as well. That day was sweltering. The air hung heavy and thick, and the streets of Virginia were filled with the scents of coffee, fresh bread, and spices. Life flowed at its usual rhythm, women chatted by the stalls, men returned from work, and children played in the dusty yards. For sisters Valkyria and Liliana Silva, the day began just like any other. The girls were only 14 and 16, but they already felt grown up, helping their mother with chores, dreaming of the future, bright festivals, and the big cities. That evening, they met with their friend Katia Xavier, a few years older, who worked as a cleaner nearby. The girls often walked home together, it was both safer and more enjoyable. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the trio decided to take a shortcut through a small forest separating their two neighborhoods. They had known this path since childhood, a narrow trail winding through overgrowth, past scattered trees and abandoned buildings. But that evening, the forest felt different. The air was heavier than outside, and the smell was strange, pungent, and unpleasant, as if something rotten lurked in the earth. "Do you feel that?" Katia whispered, stopping. "Maybe a dead dog," Liliana replied uncertainly. They quickened their pace, trying not to look around. But the forest seemed to thicken around them. Every rustle of leaves sounded too loud, every exhale too sharp. At the edge of a clearing, near a half-collapsed brick wall, something moved. At first, the girls thought it was a dog, or perhaps an injured goat. But as they approached, the figure lifted its head. It crouched there, hunched and thin, its skin gleaming as if coated in oil. It looked both human and animal, yet excessively gaunt and unnaturally elongated. Its head was enormous, with 3 strange bumps on the crown, like budding horns. Its face seemed from another world, elongated, with a tiny mouth and 2 massive eyes glowing red, like embers in a fire. Those eyes met the girls' gazes. And in that moment, each of them felt a whisper echo inside their minds. Indistinct words ran goosebumps across their skin, words impossible to understand, yet saturated with despair and malice. "We see you," seemed to sound in their consciousness. Valkyria screamed first. Liliana tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. Katia pushed her friends forward, and the 3 of them stumbled back toward the road, hearts pounding so hard it felt as if they could be heard outside. The creature did not move. It merely turned its head slowly, watching them with a gaze more terrifying than any attack. When the girls burst into the Silva house, their mother immediately knew something terrible had happened. Valkyria cried, Liliana could barely speak, and Katia was as pale as death. "What did you see?" their mother demanded. A trembling whisper came from them, "We saw the devil." By the next day, news of what they had witnessed had spread throughout the town. Newspapers wrote of a strange creature, TV programs sensationalized the story. People argued, shared details, and children feared going out after dark. Some claimed they too had seen similar beings on the outskirts. Others swore that a dark shadow had flown over the town that night. And soon, Varjinja was no longer a quiet town. It had become a place of fear. Rumors in small towns spread faster than fire through dry reeds. The morning after the girls claimed to have seen the devil, Varjinja buzzed like a disturbed hive. Neighboring women repeated every word of the Silva sisters, adding new details. Some insisted the creature had claws, others claimed it emitted a hum like a beehive. Children scared each other on the streets with frightening stories, while men debated over mugs of beer. Was it true, or just the imagination of frightened girls? But the more people spoke, the less room there was for laughter. The tension in the air thickened. People felt it, something inexplicable had indeed happened in their town. On the 3rd day after the incident, military vehicles entered Varjinja. 2 dark green trucks with no markings, accompanied by a jeep, moved slowly, as if deliberately letting the residents take them in. "Probably just exercises," someone said. "Exercises? Here, in our nowhere town," replied another. But not a single soldier smiled, and not one spoke to the locals. Their faces were tense, serious. They moved in groups, scouring the outskirts, peering into overgrowth and abandoned houses. Some claimed to have seen soldiers, wearing gloves and masks, carrying something wrapped in black canvas from the bushes. Its shape resembled a human body. But the witnesses' eyes were too far away, and fear made it impossible to look closer. Residents on the outskirts began hearing strange noises at night, the heavy hum of engines, creaking metal, distant commands. Sometimes it seemed as if a whole convoy was passing outside their windows, but when they looked, the streets were empty. "They're looking for something," neighbors whispered. "Hiding something from us." And with each passing day, the rumors grew darker. A week later, the entire town was shaken by a story. A young soldier involved in the operation suddenly died. His body was reportedly found in a hospital showing signs of a strange infection. His skin was covered in blotches, his fever wouldn't subside, and the doctors could not explain the illness. Officially, they said it was contamination from contact with animals. But people whispered another version: he had touched them. And for that, he paid the price. And then they appeared. 4 men in black suits and dark glasses. No one knew where they had come from, but everyone saw them entering homes and asking questions, especially of those who claimed to have seen the creature. It was said they offered money for silence. Some were threatened. They also came to the Silva house. The girl's mother later recalled that the men sat at the table, their eyes cold, repeating, "You are mistaken. You did not see what you think. Forget it." But how could anyone forget the gaze of those burning red eyes? With each passing day, Varjinja increasingly resembled a town under siege. Children laughed less on the streets, shutters were tightly closed at night, and dogs barked at an invisible enemy in the yards. And every resident felt that something alien had settled in the town. It had not flown into the sky. It had stayed, here among the people. But the most terrifying part wasn't even that. The most terrifying part was that the military knew about it. And not just knew, they were clearly hiding something. When fear appears in a small town, it thickens like fog. It seeps into every home, rests on shoulders, makes people whisper and glance over empty streets. That's exactly what happened in Varjinja. By day, life went on as usual, people went to the market, children played, shops opened. But when night fell, the town seemed to freeze. Shutters closed, dogs began to howl, and the streets emptied. And that was when they came, the military. The first to notice them was an old man named Daniel. He lived on the outskirts, closest to the fields. Awakened in the night by a strange hum, he looked out the window and saw a convoy of vehicles slowly moving along the road, their headlights off. In the darkness, only the matte silhouettes of the trucks glimmered. Soldiers in black masks jumped from the vehicles and walked into the fields, holding flashlights with red beams. The red light sliced through the darkness like a knife, creating the impression that they were hunting not animals, but demons. Those who peeked later reported that cries often came from the underbrush. They weren't human, yet couldn't be called animal. They were sounds of pain, despair, and rage, long, muffled, hoarse. They were catching something, Daniel later told his neighbors. Something that didn't want to give in. Sometimes there were gunshots, sometimes sharp commands, and sometimes a heavy metallic crash, as if someone had fallen along with a cage. A few days later, several residents claimed they had seen soldiers dragging a strange object to a truck, wrapped in black canvas. By its shape, it was too small to be human, yet too large to be an animal. The body writhed. It was alive. The truck drove away, leaving behind a smell, pungent, acrid, a mixture of sulfur and rotting earth. The odor lingered for hours and clung to clothing. Local families began to pray more fervently than ever. The Silva girl's mother placed a candle before the icon of the Virgin Mary each night. The elders recited psalms. But prayers offered no relief. People felt that their town had become the stage for some alien game. And the worst part, no one knew how many such creatures were hiding in the forests and basements. 1. 2. Dozens. One late evening, 2 teenagers, eager to spy on the soldiers, crept closer to the fields. They hid in the tall grass and saw a scene they would never forget. In a circle of red light stood a creature, or rather, it was being held. It curled up, covering its head with long arms, its body trembling. Its eyes, enormous and red, stared straight into the darkness where the boys hid. And in that moment, it seemed to each of them that a voice echoed inside their heads. Weak, broken, but clear, help me. They ran, their bare feet cut on sharp stones, but they could not stop. Because there was only one feeling: they had been seen. Recognized. By the end of January 1996, Varjinja was no longer the same town. People feared going outside, even in the daytime. Military trucks patrolled the outskirts, and rumors multiplied. Some said they had captured 3 creatures. Others claimed there were far more. And some whispered that one of them was still roaming free. And in that darkness, the town realized a simple truth: the hunt continued. And no one knew who would be the next prey. The hospital in Varjinja in 1996 was a modest facility. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, long corridors dimly lit by flickering lamps. Normally, patients came here after accidents, flu, or heart problems. But that night, doctors and nurses faced something they had never learned about in medical school. Around midnight, a military jeep arrived at the emergency entrance. From it, they carried something covered in a tarp and quickly dragged it through the service door, not allowing anyone near. Soldiers stood guard at the doors, and the blinds were immediately drawn over the windows. Lucia, the nurse on duty that night, later swore that she saw something moving beneath the tarp. She heard muffled sounds, not screams or moans, but a buzzing, like a massive swarm of bees. Doctors called in from home were led into the same room on the 3rd floor. Regular staff had no access. But rumors spread quickly. People said that inside lay a non-human. Some nurses claimed to have glimpsed its silhouette. It was small, emaciated, with dark, shiny skin. The head was too large. Its eyes, looking into them was impossible, glowed red in the depths of its sockets. One nurse, Antonia, later recounted that while carrying instruments into the locked room, she noticed the creature staring directly at her. It didn't move, made no sound, only that gaze. In that moment, she felt her heart freeze, her thoughts no longer her own. In her head, a quiet, trembling voice seemed to speak: pain. Help me. Antonia dropped the tray and ran into the corridor, unable to breathe. For several days, she couldn't sleep, and the voice still echoed in her ears. The doctors never spoke aloud about what they saw. But some staff noticed that they looked anxious, sweating, their hands trembling. One doctor allegedly muttered, "This isn't an earthly disease, it shouldn't exist here." Rumors circulated that they tried to take blood and tissue samples, but every time, the instruments either broke or produced strange readings. A smell of sulfur and wet earth lingered around the creature, making heads spin. A few days later, a tragedy struck the hospital. A young officer guarding the room suddenly fell ill. He developed a high fever, severe pain, and a rash covered his skin. Doctors could not explain the cause. He died in just 3 days. After that, the creature's body was never seen again. At night, it was taken out through the service exit. The truck disappeared into the darkness, and with it vanished all documents, records, and test results. But the memory did not disappear. For a long time, the hospital retained that strange smell, and the lamps in that corridor flickered, as if the electricity could not endure. Nurses said that sometimes at night, they heard faint rustling along the empty corridor, doors quietly creaking, though no one was there. Even years later, hospital staff whispered that the spirit of that creature still wanders the halls. It searches for anyone daring enough to look into its eyes and hear its silent cry for help. 16 kilometers from Virginia, beyond the hills and coffee plantations, there was a military base. Its existence was known only to the local farmers nearby and a few official personnel. The vast area, surrounded by barbed wire, with a tall watchtower and a detachment of soldiers, seemed like any other guarded zone, until it began receiving special cargo. Rumors about the transportation of the creatures reached Virginia through locals who accidentally saw the trucks on the road. They spoke of black tarps, buzzing sounds, and strange lights flickering at night among the trees. "What are they carrying?" farmers whispered. "This isn't for our ears," they would answer each other. One day, an elderly former soldier decided to share what he had seen. He recounted how a small creature had been brought to the base. It was confined in a metal cage with thick walls and, according to the witness, shivered all over as if it felt the fear of the people around it. Inside the base were laboratories accessible only to high-ranking officers. Rumors said that one of the creatures had been dismantled, its organs examined under microscopes. Some officers supposedly whispered among themselves, "It's neither human nor animal. Where was it born? Perhaps, on another planet." No official documents or records existed. Everything was kept secret, and base personnel maintained strict silence. It was on this base that the mysterious "men in black" appeared for the first time. For men, dressed in suits and dark sunglasses, would appear on the base, check documents, inspect storage areas, and leave as suddenly as they arrived. Locals said that these men left no trace except the feeling of cold and terror. Their visits were a warning. Even for the military, this secret was too dangerous to reveal. Over time, rumors began circulating that some of the creatures had been transported out of the country. Supposedly, American military trucks arrived in Brazil, and the bodies of the creatures were flown away to unknown destinations. "They took them at night, under the cover of darkness," said one former soldier. "We didn't know where. But the sound of engines, the smell of sulfur, and the chill in the air, I will never forget it." For Virginia, these events marked the beginning of a new era. Residents began to believe that beyond their fields, forests, and homes, something existed that watched, hunted, and hid. Panic and fear mingled with curiosity. The town was no longer just a quiet corner of Brazil. It became a place where people looked with caution, hoping to uncover the truth. And in that moment, amidst the silence of the military base, among the locked laboratories and empty corridors, the mysterious creatures continued to exist. Pain lingered in their gaze, and their whispers carried a cry for help. After the secret of the military base began to spread among the residents of Virginia, the town seemed to split in two. One half of the population tried to live a normal life. They went to the market, worked on coffee plantations, taught their children, and prepared for carnival. The other half lived in constant fear, spending nights with shutters tightly closed and whispering by day about the latest rumors of the creatures and military operations. The elders told stories to their grandchildren about the unclean ones that had emerged from the forest, warning them to stay away from the outskirts. The youth, on the other hand, were drawn by curiosity. Teenagers boldly climbed abandoned buildings and ventured into the woods, searching for traces of what had happened. "There, in the forest, you can see a real monster," they whispered to each other. Yet most adults tried to keep the children away from the rumors, fearing that panic might sweep through the town. It wasn't only humans who sensed the fear. Farm animals remained on edge, cows no longer grazed calmly, dogs constantly growled at empty corners, and nocturnal birds behaved unusually, as if warning of something alien approaching. Rumors began to evolve into real sightings. Many residents reported strange lights in the sky, and some claimed to have seen small figures hiding among the trees. Descriptions of the creatures almost perfectly matched what Valkyrie, Liliana, and Katia had seen: thin bodies, large heads, and red eyes. Each such sighting fueled the fear. The town lived in constant anxiety. No one could distinguish truth from fiction. Word of Varjinja reached ufologists across the country. Researchers arrived, eager to document anomalies, collect soil samples, and take photographs. They spoke with locals, gathered testimonies, and studied the lights in the night sky. "The town has become a kind of center for mysticism," one researcher wrote in a report. "Here, anyone can encounter what others refuse to believe." Gradually, the town divided into those who believed in the supernatural and those who dismissed it as fantasy. Yet neither side could completely ignore what was happening. Some saw the lights, some heard the sounds, and some felt a foreign presence in their homes. The town existed in a constant duality. By day, it was an ordinary rural settlement. By night, it became an arena for something incomprehensible, unknown, and terrifying. And in that moment, Varjinja's story began to transform into a legend, one that would be spoken of for many years. Rumors, fears, sightings, and mystical events intertwined, creating an aura that still draws ufologists and paranormal enthusiasts to this day. Several months had passed since the first creatures appeared in Varjinja, and the consequences of those events were beginning to unfold in full. The small town, once quiet and almost unnoticed on the map, had become a place where reality blended with mysticism, and fear walked hand in hand with curiosity. Many residents began to suffer from nightmares. Valkyrie, Liliana, and Katia could not forget their encounter with the creature in the forest. Even years later, when they recalled that night, they felt a chill along their spines and a shiver in their hands. But it wasn't only the teenagers who felt the aftermath. Adult residents complained of insomnia, a constant sense of anxiety, and the feeling that someone was watching them. Local families became cautious, doors were locked earlier, windows tightly shuttered, and lights were barely turned on at night. People began creating their own protective rituals. Candles, crosses, and amulets appeared in the windows. At crossroads, small figurines and stone symbols were placed to ward off the other. People would warn one another. "Watch out, the forest doesn't forgive the curious." These rituals merged with traditional celebrations. Carnivals began incorporating mystical elements, costumes, and masks reminiscent of the creatures. Fear gradually became a cultural phenomenon. News of the events of 1996 quickly spread across the country and beyond. Ufologists, journalists, and paranormal researchers began visiting Varjinja to study the area, gather testimonies, and attempt to document anomalies. "Something really happened here," wrote one researcher in a report. "I saw the lights, heard the sounds, and felt the presence of something alien." With each visit, the number of tourists grew. Local residents began to see an opportunity. Hotels, souvenir shops, and guided tours along the observation forest trails, the town was transforming into a center of mystical tourism. The events of January 1996 had become more than just an incident. Stories of the creatures, nightly sightings, and secret military operations passed from person to person. Each resident added new details to the tale, creating the myth of Varjinja as a town where two worlds intersected, the ordinary and the supernatural. The legend grew. It was believed that the creatures sometimes returned, and that the eyes glowing in the forest could see anyone daring to approach too closely. And although no one had seen the creatures in person for years, their presence was still felt. The town began to live under the sign of mysticism. In 2001, a 20-foot water tower monument shaped like a flying saucer, the Neva Spatial Varjinja, was built in memory of the events. In 2004, Varjinja hosted an international ufology congress. Residents realized that fear and fascination had transformed their town into a unique place, mystical, dangerous, and captivating at the same time. Stories of creatures, military operations, and the mysterious "men in black" became part of the town's cultural code, attracting people from around the world. More than 20 years later, Varjinja still remains a symbol of mystery. People continue to argue about what was real and what was imagined. But one thing is clear: the events of 1996 left an indelible mark. The fear the residents experienced, and the legends they created, turned an ordinary town into a place where mystical history comes alive every day. And while many might call it fiction, for those who lived through it, it is part of their life, forever imprinted in memory, like the glowing red gaze in the dark forest. More than 2 decades have passed since the mysterious events of January 1996. Varjinja, once a quiet rural town, had become a center for mystical research and ufological tourism. But the town's fame was dual-sided: some came for science, others for thrills, and a third group simply sought adventure. Since the early 2000s, the town began actively embracing its mystical history. The forests where the creature had been sighted were now observation trails, where guides would recount the legends of glowing red eyes in the darkness. Here, according to tradition, you can hear strange sounds at night, a guide would tell a group of tourists, pointing toward the dense undergrowth. And if you listen closely, you might hear a buzzing, or a whisper. Tourists arrived with cameras and stayed overnight in local homes to experience the atmosphere spoken of in the legends. The town transformed into an open-air museum of mysticism. The events of 1996 attracted not only paranormal enthusiasts but also serious researchers. Ufologists arrived with equipment, documenting anomalous flashes, strange lights in the forest, and unexplained noises. Some claim to have seen silhouettes of creatures resembling the descriptions of Valkyrie, Liliana, and Katia. "I can't explain these observations," said one scientist. But something unusual is clearly happening here. The town's residents continued to share their stories. Elders, who remembered that night, recounted the red eyes, the strange sounds, and the mysterious trucks. The youth, raised on these tales, added new details. Some reported lights in the fields, others whispered of voices among the tree branches. The legend became alive. It evolved, adapting to the modern world, yet retaining its core, the encounter with a non-human being. The town continued to live under the sign of mysticism. Locals noticed strange sensations, cold waves running down their spines, sudden footsteps in empty rooms, glowing points deep in the forest. Sometimes it feels like they are still here, an elderly woman whispered, gazing toward the woods. They are watching. These sensations reinforce the legend, making it part of the town's culture. Varjinja became not only a tourist destination but also a symbol of the unknown, a place where the boundaries of reality blur. Since the emergence of the legend, the town has repeatedly appeared in television reports, documentaries, and books. Each new piece fueled interest and attracted more tourists. Local cafes sold souvenirs depicting red eyes and the creature's silhouette, and children's carnival costumes replicated its appearance. Today, years later, no one knows for certain what was real and what was legend. But one thing is clear, the mystical events of 1996 permanently changed the town. The fear that once gripped its residents has become a cultural heritage, and curiosity has become the driving force behind tourism and research. And in this small Brazilian town, life continues on the edge of reality and mysticism. Every night, as the forest falls into darkness and moonlight reflects off empty windows, it feels as if the story of 1996 is not yet over. Something invisible still watches, waits, and whispers its mysterious call to anyone daring enough to come near. With each passing year, Varjinja continued to attract attention. The town had long ceased to be just a rural settlement, it had become a symbol of mysticism, mystery, and the unknown. The legend of 1996 had turned into a cultural phenomenon, yet the story continued to live its own nocturnal rhythms. In the 2000s and 2010s, new researchers arrived. They documented strange lights in the forests, disappearing shadows, and unusual noises that could not be explained by natural causes. Some tourists claimed to have seen silhouettes of creatures resembling the original descriptions by Valkyrie, Liliana, and Katia, slender bodies, large heads, and red eyes. It stands there, in the dark, and watches, witnesses would say. And it seems to know more about you than you know yourself. Local residents reported inexplicable events, windows opening where no one was present, doors creaking without wind, quiet whispers or buzzing sounds at night. Many insisted they felt the presence of something alien, something that penetrated the mind. The town's culture ultimately transformed fear into celebration. Annual carnivals incorporated mystical elements, forest tours, and nighttime excursions, following the creature's trails. The legend became part of everyday life. Children learned from an early age about the red eyes in the forest, tourists arrived to experience a sense of mystery, and researchers came to try to solve the puzzle. Yet, despite its popularity and tourism, the true mystery remained unsolved. No one knows what happened to the creatures after 1996, where they were hidden, or whether they were truly taken abroad. Every witness offers their own version, but none are officially confirmed. Still, the sense of presence endures. The forests, the fields, even the empty streets of the town continue to whisper about that January morning. For the residents, it is memory and fear, for tourists, adventure and wonder, and for everyone else, an unexplainable enigma that makes one believe that somewhere beyond the ordinary, something alien and powerful truly exists. The story of Varjinja remains alive. It intertwines with reality and fiction, fear and curiosity. And although many years have passed, the town continues to hold its secret, red eyes in the dark forest, whispers among the tree branches, and a quiet call of creatures that may still be watching us. The legend has ended, but its echo remains forever. And every visitor to Varjinja becomes part of this story, part of a mystical shadow that will never disappear.